Hey, everybody. I want to welcome you to this week's Business Insights with Matt Milia. And I'm super excited because I've been working so hard to coordinate and get with Tiffany so that she could get on this podcast here. And I can't wait for her to share some of the challenges that may be holding you back that you may not even realize are happening in your life. And ultimately, it's stopping you from progression of growth and where you want to get to. But before we get into that, let me go ahead here and cue that intro. Welcome to Business Insights with Matt Milia. I'm your host, Matt Milia. And in this podcast, we'll talk about the real, raw, uncut business success secrets you won't find anywhere else. Follow my journey from entry level to CEO. We discuss real actionable items you can plug into your business right away. To subscribe to our weekly top tips, you can go to www.mattpodcast.com and join our community of elite high-level performers. And if you're interested in our inside sales company, you can go to www.appointmentstoday.com to jump on a free strategy call. And now, stay tuned for our podcast. All right. What's going on, Tiffany? How are you?
I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited to have you on. So for everyone that is tuning in, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you specialize in?
Absolutely. So my name is Tiffany Toombs, and my mission in this life is really to empower 1 million people to unlearn all the things that they have picked up on, all the limiting beliefs, the things that hold them back from truly discovering what they are capable of achieving. So that's everything I do is based around that.
That's awesome. And I'm going to limit myself to not get too deep because there's so much to unpack with this. As far as limiting beliefs, and I would even call it indoctrinations, where we have these ingrained beliefs, whether it's through family, whether it comes through schooling. I mean, what would you say is probably some of the biggest obstacles that you see when it comes to people overcoming those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, so I would say the first one is that people don't even realize that they're sabotaging themselves. They don't realize that there's things there. And I think it's important for people to understand that trauma is like a universal thing. It is part of our human experience. We're all going to experience trauma. It's going to be different levels. I know some of us will have it more quote unquote extreme. I don't really like that word, but some people will face tougher challenges, for example, than other people. And the number one thing that stops people from actually getting started on this journey is that they deny it, right? Like somebody else had it worse, but I've had some success. And so clearly I don't have stuff, right? I've worked with numerous 7-figure entrepreneurs. They've created a 7-figure business where they're bringing in multiple millions, not billions, multiple millions. They've got the cars, they've got the house, they can do the vacations, they can kind of do whatever they want, but there's still something holding them back. And so when they come and work with me, they're like, I don't really think that there's anything there, but, let's see. And so many people, because we live in a world that like glorifies the struggle, right? And we talk about like no pain, no gain. If there's no struggle, it's not worth it. And I mean, you do have to fall in love with the journey, but if the journey is a total struggle, nobody's going to fall in love with that, right? If it's always like you're pushing stuff uphill and it's always hard, nobody's going to fall in love with that journey. And so it's about realizing that we all have stuff. We, from the moment we were born, really the moment we were conceived is when things start. We take on half of dad's DNA. We take on half of mom's DNA. We actually know now that their DNA contains their trauma. So we're carrying belief systems from them, emotions from them into this life. The mom and the baby are connected with a blood supply. So if the mom has a stressful pregnancy, it actually starts programming the fetus with that when the baby's in the womb. And then we come out and we're this like mostly blank canvas. And immediately we're given all these identities racial identities, sexual identities, socioeconomic identities. We pick up identities depending on which side of the tracks we live on, or, whether our parents were essential in society or not, right? What kind of
Right.
ranking they hit. And so all of these things impact our identity, but none of it is who we truly are. And
Oh,
especially between the ages of 0 and 7, we have two major needs that need to be met. And if they're not, then we start developing, trauma, limiting beliefs, and whatnot. So the first is safety and security. And the second is love, acceptance, and connection. And I would go as far to argue that for a child, the love, acceptance, and connection is the most important one, because that's what gives them the safety and security. And so when those aren't met, maybe mom is criticizing you, like, why can't you be more like little Susie or little Tommy down the street? Or like, your brother did good on his test, why can't you? Or, there's criticisms, or the house has to be clean for when people come over. We have to look perfect to the outside world. We get in trouble for breaking a plate, right? Then we go to school, we fail a test, and it gets catastrophized. This one mistake gets catastrophized, and now we're a failure, and we're walking around with this label that we're the loser, and we're not enough, or we're not smart enough, whatever it is. All of these things start planting seeds for our limiting belief systems that we look to validate and essentially water throughout our life. And then we hit adulthood, and now we've got these massive weeds in the garden of our mind that are sucking our energy. They're sucking our creativity and our innovation, our ability to lead ourselves and other people. And I mean, even our focus and our productivity. So it holds us back from truly being able to hit the levels that we're capable of.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack. And it was funny because some of the stuff that you were saying, I'm like, man, I remember that stuff from my childhood. All of a sudden it started like opening up some old, I'm like, whoa, I just quickly accessed it. I love it. You trained with Marshall Silver, I believe. Is that correct?
So
NLP.
that's not who I studied NLP with. I actually studied when I lived in Australia. When I came back, I did do some mentoring from Marshall, and I spoke on his stage a couple times. Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. So the reason why I brought that up, and I believe it was you. I remember watching a video with how to handle anxiety and stress. And there was something about where you would do like these motions with your hands and it would automatically bring you down. And I know so many people deal with anxiety and stress, and there's so many things I want to talk about, but I'm going to, because there's a lot of stress. I of course don't want to get, kicked off of any social media platforms for talking about some of these things, but
I'll speak in code.
Yeah, the media is not helping right now.
No.
And there's a lot of people that are just living in this constant state of fear. I even find myself in a position where there'll be days where I'm focusing on the wrong things and it becomes my entire day.
Yeah.
How do you, and the reason why I brought up NLP was because when I've studied NLP, of course, not to the extent that you have, because I've learned so much just from watching your videos. And a lot of it I've learned from a sales element, how to convince, how to persuade, and how to do it in a way that's elegant and you're not coming off as some cheesy, gimmicky, over the top person that's trying to extract money, when really I've never actually looked at it from almost an inside out standpoint, if that makes sense, where you just study it and say, okay, what is it that is holding me back? It seems like that's something that you've got dialed in. Is that really what your main focus is?
Yeah. So the study of NLP that we look at is understanding how the mind works, the interplay between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. So most people attempt to live their life from like a conscious mind place. And the conscious mind is your willpower. It's your self-discipline. As you're watching this interview and you're thinking, oh, that's a crazy point. I never knew about that. Tiffany's so funny. Like whatever comes into your head, that's your conscious mind. And so because those are the thoughts that we're aware of, people tend to think that that's in control. Plus, the unconscious mind has been demonized, right? Freud was like, oh, it's this dark, scary thing that's working against you. But the reality is that your unconscious mind, firstly, it's 96% of your mind's capacity. So it is the overwhelming majority of your mind. And it also actually wants you to have everything that you want, but it's programmed based on your beliefs, your emotions, your memories, and your words, the things that you think and the things that you say. And so, where so many people get stuck is it's like they're watching TV and they want to be watching Squid Games or whatever the like newest show is. I just see it on Instagram all the time, but you know,
Right.
they want to be watching Game of Thrones or whatever it is, but like Coco Melon or some kid show, Peppa Pig. My brother's like, if I have to watch Peppa Pig one more time, he's got a toddler. And it's like Peppa Pig's on the screen and you're like, you know, you wouldn't call up your TV provider and be like, why is this on my, you know, this is all your fault. You would get
Right.
the remote and you would change the channel. And people don't realize that we have that same ability. We just have to tap into the unconscious mind. This is why a lot of people who rely on willpower and self-discipline don't make long-term change, because willpower and self-discipline are the conscious mind. So you're basically expecting the 4% of your mind to overpower the 96% 100% of the time. And that's just not going to happen, right? Though nobody would ever take those odds. So what we
Yeah.
want to do is we want to start working at the unconscious level. Anxiety in the now tends to be, so there's a couple things that happen. Firstly, we've got the fear center of our brain, the amygdala, it's kind of back here.
Mm-hmm.
And it perceives real and perceived threats. That's what triggers it to turn on. We've got our intellect, which is in the prefrontal cortex right here behind our forehead. This is why we're different than the cavemen. We have a bigger forehead because we have this section. And that's where all your intellect sits, like all the things that you have read and learned in books and schools and degrees and all of that sits here. Now, the two actually talk to each other. And this is a beneficial thing, right? We don't want our fear center, which can perceive perceived threats as something to be, you know, be on high alert about. So we want them to talk and say like, oh my gosh, those people in the corner of the cafe are whispering. They must be whispering about me. And then the intellect going, not about you. It's okay. Like, just keep doing your thing. They're probably, you know, talking about a Tinder date from last night and they don't want everybody to hear. But when we're highly stressed out, the last 20 months, for example, and I mean, this breakdown happened before the last 20 months, but the last 20 months have accelerated it and just brought everything up to the surface, is that whenever we're highly stressed, we're in this hustle and grind mode. We're in a society that is like, you know, go, 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 do more, do more, do more, keep up with the Joneses, blah, blah, blah. That connection starts to slowly drop off and break down. And now we're left with all this intellect that has no way to impact the fear center of our brain. And what happens when those two completely break down, when the links break down, the fear center takes over. And now we're completely being run by fear programming. So that's been coming up for a lot of people. The other thing that has been coming up for people is what most people don't realize is when we're younger and we experience an intense emotion, like our parents take us to the toy store, won't buy us the toy. We feel that anger, we throw the temper tantrum. Most people like get in trouble for, you know, putting time out, depending on your parents. Maybe you got a little spanking sent to your room, whatever it was.
Right.
The 2-year-old never got to deal with that emotion. And so they created an imprint of it. And every time they felt how that 2-year-old felt, they've created a link in the chain. But more importantly, part of their psyche actually got stuck at 2 years old. And in times of high stress, if you imagine that you have like a stress bucket that can only hold so much, when that stress bucket is full, again, for most people, it was full before 2020 hit. And then 2020 like dumped a whole other bucket's worth of stress into it. What happens is we actually revert back to the ages that we were when those imprints were first created. So now we have people in adult bodies who are responding from a mentality of 2 years old or 4 years old or 6-year-old, attempting to navigate the current times, and it just does not work.
I mean, that in itself is so profound. And, you would never think in that you wouldn't think that that's how we respond to things as we get older because we evolve, but it makes complete sense because there's those times where you feel cloudy. Maybe you can't come up with something. You've got a stressor that you don't even know about. Have you have you experienced that quite a bit with some of the coaching clients and individuals that you help? I mean, have you experienced that they've just got a lot of things holding them back that they didn't even realize were there?
Yeah, so often what will happen is people will come to me with what they think is the problem, and we call this the presenting problem. So it might be something like, I'm procrastinating, I have a fear of failure, I have a fear of success, I'm not implementing. They kind of know the behavior
Yeah.
that's the problem, but ultimately our behaviors are symptoms of our belief systems. And so we can't get true long-term sustainable change until we work on the belief system. Most people work on the behavior, right? I'm
Mm.
procrastinating, so I need to be more focused. I need to do more. I need to make more calls. I need to force myself through it. But all that does is it creates unhealthy habits and loops in the mind where it just amplifies any of the negative feelings that we're already feeling. So what we
So,
ultimately go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead. I was trying to get you're expanding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, ultimately what we wanna do is we want to get in and, like,
Mm.
people into their business or into their marriages or into the parenting their kids. They're not just dealing with it in that situation because 'cause they've got this, like, bucket full of negative emotion that they've held on to their entire life. So, they're running their business during what we've experienced for the last 20 months, and they're bringing 20 years, 30 years, 50 years of uncertainty and not good enough and failure and all of that into that one moment. They're bringing all those beliefs into that one moment, and then they're responding or reacting really from that lifetime of emotional baggage. So what my aim to do is for people is to empty this bucket. I can never take away the ebbs and flows. Like, life's always going to throw you curveballs.
Oh
There's
yeah.
always going to be, the ocean is always going to have waves. But what I can do is I can give you better tools, a better surfboard, a better understanding of how to ride that surfboard so that when those things do come up, instead of it feeling like Mount Everest in these, the Grand Canyon, it feels like a little kid wave.
Makes total sense. And for everyone that's watching, which actually I want to make sure that I add this on here. For everyone that's watching, reach out to Tiffany on Facebook, Tiffany.Toombs. You're also at Blue Lotus Mind, Tiffany at BlueLotusMind.com. I had the second part memorized. But for everyone that's watching, I mean, this is really it's a game changer, and I can tell you just from my own personal experience and talking about how in 2020 with the whole pandemic and the shutdown and all of that, uh, we went from having one of our best years and to having our worst, and
Mhm.
it really was it definitely changed my perception of everything that I've worked so hard to build. And then, of course, that fear of failure came into play. And I was that guy that always went to, and this was, of course, fear of failure. I always went to all of these seminars. We actually all had a lot of the same coaches, Frank Kern, Stuman. I mean, we were all in very similar groups for a while. And I remember I was spending all this money on all this coaching, and I was implementing none of it. And I was sitting there because I'm like, oh, I'm too afraid to make a change in my business. I don't want to start doing lead generation because we have an inside sales company. And what we're generally doing is we're making these phone calls, but they're to cold leads. And look, your phone, when it rings, most people are like, I don't know that number. And they toss the phone away. Well, me, I'm sitting there. Well, if we just make 1,000 calls and a few people pick up, we can potentially get a cold sale. Does it work for some people? Yes, but it's very challenging, especially now with the spam blockers, all the technology, everything that came out, and my fear of, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can market. I don't know if I'm good enough to market. I don't want to mess anything up. I just stuck the course and I stayed that course entirely too long. And knowing what I know today, we changed course, of course. We changed course, of course. We changed our strategy. We made it so that we were marketing to more people. We were customizing our content to the needs of the community. But everything that you're saying resonates with me so much because I was in that exact same position where it was fear to make a move. I was in consumption mode, but I was not in let's take action. And there's got to be something that I guess if I were really to deconstruct it, it probably does go back to childhood and school and fear of, the teacher saying that you're not doing good enough or you're never going to amount to anything. I've had teachers tell me that before. Would you say that that's something that a lot of people deal with on a daily basis? And is it positive affirmations? Is it reminders? Like, what is it that helps them kind of unpack all of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to know like the reason that self-sabotage happens, right? The reason people do all these courses, spend all this money, go to the seminars, etc., but they don't ever take action is because their belief system, so beliefs about themselves, about other people, about the world, about money, all of that is not in alignment with the belief of what they want, right? So people will say, I want to build a 7-figure business, but they see themselves as a lower middle class. Like for a long time, I'd be like, we're lower middle class. I'm from a lower middle class family. And it became like my identity. And then one day I was like, wait a minute, why am I fighting for my limitation here? Like, why am I holding on to this identity? And, I grew up with hearing the people who had money being criticized and, being called names and things like that. And so I unconsciously associated having money with not being a very good person. And so that stopped me for so long from actually making it. So to truly get the long-term change, you have to go into the unconscious mind. We have to do some rewiring in there. Will journaling, will positive affirmations work? Absolutely. It's going to take a longer period of time and you have less flexibility in terms of the mistakes that you can make. Right. So with positive affirmations, most people will say their positive affirmations in the morning, maybe at night, but then they just let themselves talk however they want during the day or think however they want. Right. Yep. So something will happen and they'll be like, oh, I'm such a loser. Oh, that person, I can't believe they had the audacity to ask me for money. Right. And then so we're reinforcing those old pathways while we're trying to build new ones. And so this is why positive affirmations can take some time. I get my clients to do it as like a reinforcer to what we're doing, but ultimately we're giving that 2-year-old or that 5-year-old or the 7-year-old or whoever it was that the teacher said, you'd never amount to anything. We give them a voice to say what they need to say, to ask for what they needed to ask for, to feel safe, to feel loved and accepted. And that ultimately allows that old trauma to like fizzle out and to lose its spark. So now when you're having to make change, right? The world has changed, technology, pandemics, whatever it is. Now, all of a sudden, we can make the shifts that we need to faster. We can upgrade the identity that we have and the belief systems that we have faster to align with where we're going rather than them being in conflict with each other.
I love it. And I mean, and it all ties together that theme because I even have like my own positive affirmation. Today I will thrive. I will do more than just survive. I will be a better man than I was the day before. And it sounds nice. It's positive. It's uplifting. I feel better after saying it. But then you're right. Throughout some other courses of the day, oh man, I can't believe this person, or I find myself saying even to myself, oh, why didn't I do that? That was so stupid. And it's things, and I consider myself a positive person, but I know there are things that are holding me back. And I think that that's so impactful. So for everyone that is tuning in, Tiffany, what is it that so are you offering in terms of the coaching? Is it like, what does it look like if someone wanted to work with you? I mean, do you do one-on-one? Do you do group? How does it all work?
Yeah, I have a range of programs, and I've created a range of programs for a couple reasons. Some people like the group element. Some people, sorry, some people like one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I only have so much one-on-one time,
Of course.
so we're creating the group programs in a way that people get their own personalized journey within the program while still getting, the support of the community within it. And then I've created them at different, levels for investment, because everybody's starting at different places. I know when I first started, I didn't have the kind of money that I have now to invest in myself, but I needed something to get started. And I know that there's people who are in that position who want to get started and they'll do the work. They just need that option. So, like I said, I have a range of programs, differing in length. I have membership programs. I have, high ticket programs. We're going to start running more retreats next year as well, so that we can have people in a container for a period of time and do some more work. But ultimately, it all centers around that unlearning who you're not, reconnecting with who you truly are, and releasing everything that doesn't align with that.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, and this is very exciting for me, because I've been following what you and Sid have been doing now for quite some time, and I think that it's great that you guys are going above and beyond the everyday coaching, because you really don't find. I would probably say you're in a niche, but at the same time, it's a niche that everyone needs. It's not just something where you're hyper focused on a very small segment of people. Everybody can use what you guys have.
It's interesting you say that, because, I've had so many coaches who are like, you have to niche down to a person. And I'm like, I can't, because I don't want to leave anybody else out. So I've decided really to niche into the problem that I solve, of breaking people out of the self-sabotage and burnout cycle. And I mean, everybody's in it for different reasons. So, the toolbox that I have is so vast that if you have the problem of burnout, or you have the problem of self-sabotage, or you have both, we've got the tools to work you out of that.
We'll have to do some more talking as well offline, because I do have these challenges as well. Especially, and for me, it's taken me a long time to be open to share vulnerabilities, because I've always thought, oh, vulnerability, that's a sign of weakness, and that's indoctrination from when I was young.
Absolutely. I mean that's societal indoctrination for men, right? Like, boys don't cry, toughen up, and then when you do share vulnerabilities and people weaponize them against you or make fun of you for them or whatever, then it becomes this place of like, I'm not safe here, right? Human beings are interesting in that we're both predator and prey animals. And so being vulnerable is us saying, I'm going to not be the lion today, and I'm going to be the zebra, and I'm going to stand next to a lion at the watering hole and let my defenses down and trust that the lion's not going to kill me. Like that's literally the primal part of our brain goes there and is like, I'm way too exposed here. And so when we get comfortable enough that we accept ourselves and we're not seeking that external validation, that vulnerability becomes so much easier.
You painted like the most vivid picture as well. But I mean, that in itself is profound, because so many people are just afraid to let out their emotions or share their story in fear that they're going to be judged. One last thing I wanted to ask before we wrap everything up, and of course, anything you want to add, by all means. What do you think is, I think I know the answer to it, but what do you think is like the number one emotion that stops people from making change or impact? Or that's a very loaded question.
Yeah, I would say most people interpret it as fear. Okay. It's probably more of an anxiety of the unknown. But the interesting thing is that our body doesn't actually experience anxiety, fear, or excitement differently. And so when we give things a different meaning, we get a different outcome. So if we tell ourselves, I'm feeling anxiety because I'm doing this thing that I've never done before, then that's going to cause us to show up in a way that is anxiety inducing. Whereas if we tell ourselves, like, I'm doing something I've never done before and I'm really excited for it, then it changes how we show up. I had somebody ask me once, before I went on stage for Marshall Silver, actually, they said, do you ever get nervous when you speak? And I said, well, how does nervous feel for you? And they're like, like butterflies in the stomach, sweaty palms, kind of shaky. And I was like, oh, I feel excited all the time. And they're like, no, that's nerves. And I'm like, but how do you know? Like, who told you that? And they're like, well, my mom. And I'm like, okay, but how does she know? Right? Like,
Right.
how do these people that have taught you, like, how do we know that this is blue? Because that's what
Right.
we've been told. But what if we went to a different country or a different, planet, which I'm sure will happen at some point, and they're like, that is green. Neither one of us is
Right.
wrong. We've just been told, right? So,
True.
people have been told that money is evil. People have been told that money is a tool to help other people. Both people are right. So when we start giving different meanings to things, we can change our experiences and how we show up in those experiences very quickly. But to answer your question, I would say most people would perceive it as fear.
So the label that they're using, they're labeling it as one thing, but it's really a whole ball of things that
Yeah,
need to be.
it could literally
Wow,
be anything that they want it to be.
that's awesome. You have such a profound grasp on just like psychology. And did you, I mean, I'm amazed that you don't have like a doctorate in, psychiatrics. And is that something that interested you? I mean, I always ask this question, how did you get into this? Because it's so needed, but so many people just are like, oh, they go on and do their own thing. They don't think about the impact that they can have on the world with the knowledge that you have. But how'd you get into this?
So my degree is actually in exercise science and athletic training. So I've always loved sports and exercise. I started coaching when I was 14, would coach like the local sports teams on their fitness, and then I'd rehab any injuries for them. And that actually ended up taking me to Australia. I did get approached to do a master's in kind of the kinesiology exercise science realm, but I eventually backed out of it. Went to Australia, and I was helping one of the interns. I ran a athletic development facility, like a gym, but like a super developed gym. And one of our interns had a lot of back pain. It turns out that he was actually in the special forces in Afghanistan for Australia, and had watched a bunch of his friends be blown up in a IUD accident. And he was suffering from a minor case of PTSD, and it was causing bodily pain. So what a lot of people don't realize is when we hold on to unresolved emotions, it comes out in pain or dis-ease. So that could be, I mean, I've worked with people with fibromyalgia, cancer, liver disease, and they've all been cured by the work that we do because we release the emotion. The body's not holding on to the toxin anymore. And that was happening at the same time that my own life was falling apart. So the day I found out I was pregnant, I found out that my boyfriend had a girlfriend in another state. Turns out he was a compulsive liar, a narcissist. I ended up having a miscarriage that brought me to the brink of suicide. Like, I was literally steps away from stepping out in front of a cab when I realized that I had some personal stuff to heal. So I went on my own personal healing journey. I did a lot of the things that most people do, the therapists, the rah-rah events and seminars, the life coaches. And they kind of all kept telling me the same thing. Like, you can't change what happened. Just look forward. Like, just focus on where you're going. Forget about what's happened. And I'm like, well, that's what I've been doing, and it just about killed me. So that's not working,
Yeah.
not an ideal strategy. That kind of ultimately led me to NLP and hypnosis, which I studied. I did consider going back and doing a psychology degree and master's, but it actually would limit me to what I'd be able to use, the tools I'd be able to use with people. So I actually have like psychologists and counselors who come through my programs to learn these tools, and they actually stop calling themselves a therapist or a counselor and start calling themselves a coach, because then they have more flexibility, both in terms of what they charge and in terms of the tools that they use. And I've really come to realize, like, I've had such a diverse, my when it comes to like wellness, the body, the brain, my mind, like the facts just kind of stick, and I'll learn random things from people, meditation, yoga, exercise science. I'll learn all these random things, and my brain has a way of like being able to put them together in ways that nobody's ever used before to help people heal kind of mind, body, and soul. So that's what brought me here. And then I'm a total nerd. So I have like a stack of books like that big beside my bed that I'm going through that, reinforcing or learning new things in this space. So
the one thing that I absolutely love about you is that you don't always just go with the status quo, and you question everything. And we won't go into all of that because that is an entire, but we are both very much so same wavelength with a lot of that. And I feel like so many people allow external factors or the media or whatever you want to call it. They just allow that control. And I've noticed that a lot of people will allow social media or other elements that are in our lives to just control our day, control the way that we think, control the way that we respond, that we react, that we interact with others. It really is it's a horrible experience when that is what you're surrounded with. So I believe for everyone that's watching, what you have is phenomenal. And and I definitely am. I definitely want to see what other programs you have. So we'll talk about that as well offline.
Sounds good.
Because I believe that there's some opportunities that for myself, but for a lot of people too, that or even in my own network, that I can present what you have. So I think it's great. Anything that you wanted to add before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I would say I really feel like what's going on in the world right now is pushing us towards kind of this global spiritual awakening. We live in a society where everything's become really convenient. And so it's convenient for the media or social media or the influencer that we follow to tell us how to feel. It's a little bit more uncomfortable to do the inner work, to start listening to ourselves. So I would say that the world, the universe, energetically is pushing us towards stepping back into our own power. And it's going to happen. You can choose to do it on your own, or you can be dragged kicking and screaming, but it's happening. And so, if it's not me, then find somebody who you resonate with that can help you walk this path. If you're not even sure where to get started, connect with me on Facebook, because I put out a ton of free trainings as well that'll help you just really get to understand yourself at a deeper level. And then when you're ready, we can go to another level.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on. It was really great to unpack all of this with you. And for everyone that's watching, same time, same channel next week. And Tiffany, thank you again. And
Thank you.
look forward to talking with you more about this. See you, everybody.
See ya.